Alright, welcome to the second half of the two-series presentation on use of sources. This one is called Citing Sources. This is the presentation for Tom Green's classes in English 101, 102, 103, and whatever other English classes come up at Northern Essex Community College. In this presentation you will learn how and when to use sources correctly in your writing. Some of this is a review from the first part, but it's important to remember that we have to figure out exactly or remember why it is important to use sources correctly. Because in research and scholarship, people who think up ideas own those ideas. And scholars make part of our living off of having those ideas and being able to get credit for them. It advances our careers and sometimes occasionally puts a little cash in our pocket. So just in the same way that it's against the law or against the ethics of scholarship or against the rules of your school to make copies of things that you do not own the rights to, it is also inappropriate and sometimes illegal to make unauthorized copies of other people's written ideas. But at the same time, as scholars, we want to be able to share our ideas. We want to be able to incorporate the ideas of others into our own work, as long as we give credit, and also have our ideas used by others, because that expands everybody's knowledge together. It's fundamental to how scholarship works. And so, as a result, scholars have developed these systems of rules that allow us to use each other's ideas while ensuring that the owner of every idea gets credit for it in the source that uses it, or in the document that uses that as a source. And quotations, citations, and references are the tools that are used by professional scholars and students in this course, and students in every English course at NECC and at every college in the country, and every class, even not just English classes, but every class, uses quotations, citations, and references to give credit where it is due. Not just at our school, but at every school, not just in this class, but in every class, and also when you graduate after you're done in your professional life, you should still use quotations, citations, and references to give credit when you're using an idea that does not belong to you. So here's how it works. Whenever you use someone else's ideas, clearly indicate the ideas are not your own and give credit to the owner of the material. As I said in the other presentation, there are two categories of information in the world. There are ideas you have thought of and ideas that somebody else thought of. And so whenever you're writing for academic writing or in professional life, you have to separate out your ideas from the ideas of others. Whenever you quote from a published source, such as a book, a magazine, or a website, whenever you paraphrase material from one of these sources, that is, you put it in your own words, whenever you use an image, a diagram, a table, or a figure, or something from Google Images, or whenever you present another person's idea, opinion, or theory, even if it's in your own words, you must cite your source. So this is the method. This is how it works. A correct use of source has three components, and here they are. Number one, a quote. That is the stuff that you're using, the stuff you're taking from the other source. So the person's idea, which is usually text, but it could also be a picture or anything like that, enclosed in quotes if necessary, unless it's a paraphrase. Then the second part of the three parts of using sources correctly is the citation, or in-text citation, that goes with the quote and it identifies briefly where the information came from. And then the third and final part is the reference, that gives the complete name of the source with information about how to find it, and that is typically at the bottom of the page or at the end of the document. So the first two pieces, the quote and the in-text citation, go together in the body of the text, and the reference goes somewhere else. It has more extensive information so that people can locate the actual original source. Let's use an example. This is from the MLA style, which I'll explain in a minute. Suppose you have this quote and you want to use it in a paper you're writing. The quote is, "The lions of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction." This is from a poem by William Blake, early 19th century poet. The poem is called "The Marriage of Heaven and Hell." So since you didn't write this, you can't just throw it into your paper willy-nilly. That would be misuse of source, at least, and maybe plagiarism. You didn't write this, so you have to give credit to the source. So in order to do that, you incorporate it in a way like this. Here's the example. This is your text that you're writing for your paper. Say it's education class, and you've written, "Many famous poets in history have had interesting things to say about teaching and learning. Sometimes the things they have written are not what you would expect." So this is your material. You don't have to quote or cite this. This is the category of information that is stuff you have written, stuff you thought of. Now you've reached the point where you want to include the line. So you might do it something like this. For example, one famous poet wrote, open quotes, "The lions of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction," period, close quotes. That's the part one. That's the quote section. You got one of the three parts at this point. The next thing to add is the in-text citation, which looks like this. So you've got the same quote there, and with the introduction to the quote, and then after "the lions of wrath are wiser than horses of instruction," you've got open parentheses, the name Blake, the number 56, which is the page number from the book from which you took the quote, close parentheses, and period. Notice there's no letter P for page, there's no comma, there's nothing like that. Just the last name of the author, and then a space, and then the page number. Now there's a sort of a stylistic thing going on here. You can do two different ways. The one on the right here is the one we just looked at, where Blake 56 is in parentheses. But another way to do it is that you can, if you introduce the name of the author in the sentence itself, like on the example on the left, then you don't have to put the last name into parentheses. So on the left, the example says William Blake wrote Lines of Wrath, Wires, and Horses of Instruction, and then we know it's Blake, so you don't have to put his name, you just put the page number. Or on the right, instead you called him a famous poet wrote the Lines of Wrath, Wires, and Horses of Instruction, and then you put his last name in the parentheses with the page number. Yeah, both are valid, both are effective. It's just a question of which way you would rather go, and you can do them, intermix these two styles within the same document with no problem. Now there's one more part. You've got two of the three parts. You have to go with the third part of the of the citation, which is you've got the quote, you've got the in-text citation on the left there, and then at the end of your document in this style of citing, you've got a page called Works Cited, and in that page of Works Cited is the complete document information. So on the left there's the quote and the short reference, and now if I go to the back and I look under B, because they're in alphabetical order, alphabetical by last name of the author, I find that this Blake 56 refers to this guy William Blake, who wrote a book called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which was published by Signet Books in New York in 1976. And I can, in theory, now go to the library and get this edition of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell and open it up to page 56, and I should see the Marriage of I should see the line, "The Lions of Wrath are Wiser than Horses of Instruction," on that page. And so for every citation that you have in the text, as on the left, it corresponds with the citation in the back, Works Cited. For every one of those in-text citations, there must be at least one works cited, and for everything in the works cited, there must be at least one citation in the text. Now that's a quotation, but there's also this thing we call paraphrasing. That is when you want to use the ideas from a source in your research, but you don't actually want to quote the text. Often you want to shorten it up or make it a different style or something like that, and so you put it in your own words. This is called paraphrasing. There are good paraphrases and there are bad paraphrases. So let's look at an example. This passage here in the bottom is the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. And it goes, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds, blah, 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 blah." It's long, it's tedious to read, it's 18th century prose, it's going to be hard for many readers to understand. You want to use the ideas from this, but you don't want to use the actual text because it would take up too much space. So you're going to tighten it up by paraphrasing. All right, so there are good paraphrases and bad paraphrases. The trick in paraphrasing is you rewrite the original without changing the meaning. Remember, to change the meaning would be to misuse the source, but with enough changes in the language to make it different enough. How different is different enough? Well, let's look at an example first of a bad paraphrase. So the original is on the left, the paraphrase is on the right. And the original says, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary." And the paraphrase says, "When in the run of human life it becomes needful." On the left, "For one people to dissolve the political bonds." On the right, "For one group to remove the political ties," and on like that. It's just changing a word here and there. That's not good enough. You can't just take the same structure and substitute a couple of words and call that a good paraphrase. This isn't count as plagiarism, this counts as a misuse of source. So I would flag this and say, please make a better paraphrase if you did this in a paper. But in order to be different enough, it has to be something more like this. So on the left we've got, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve." And on the right you've got, "Sometimes one group of people have to cut off." On the left, "Political bonds which have connected them with another." On the right, "Political connections with another group." It's shorter, it's tighter, it's the phrasing is different, the arrangement of the words is different. It's two sentences, whereas the one on the left is one sentence. It doesn't change the meaning, but it does present the ideas in a slightly different order. And so this is a good paraphrase. If you did this, I would say good job. Now, it's a good paraphrase, but is it a complete citation, or is it a misuse of the source? And the answer is no. Even though it's a quotation and not a, even though it's a paraphrase and not a quotation, you still have to have that in-text citation in there. So Jefferson, page 210, and then I go to the back of your paper and look at your works cited, and I find what Jefferson wrote. I go to that book, I turn to page 210, and I see this sentence on that page. So even when you're paraphrasing, don't forget to include also the in-text citation and the entry in the list of works cited. So remember, If a citation is missing any of these three components, the quotation marks or a good paraphrase to show where the information came from, that the information came from another source, the citation which shows briefly where it came from and the page number, plus an entry in the works cited list that gives the complete reference, and that is a misuse of the source. And I'll remind you that there's something missing and have you put it in a revised version. Now, somebody watching this presentation may be thinking, wait a minute, I learned to use footnotes. This lesson demonstrates a particular citation style. It's only one of several different sets of citation rules used by different fields. Some styles use footnotes and endnotes. Some styles put the year of publication into the parentheses in the in-text citation. Some include complete references in a footnote instead of a list of works cited. All of these styles, there are dozens and dozens of them. All of them share the same vital elements, though. They all give credit to the originator of the idea and provide the necessary information to backtrack to the original source. So which one do you use? For English classes at Northern Essex Community College, you use the MLA style. You may be asked in other classes and other disciplines. For example, your psychology teacher may ask you to use American Psychological Association style, or maybe in a journalism class you use the Chicago Manual of Style. These are all different sorts of styles that are used for citing things. But also bear in mind that you may be using in your professional life a different style from MLA. But for the purposes of this class and other English classes at Northern Essex, we use the MLA style. Where can you find out about the MLA style? Well, there is a book that is published by the MLA. It's a real organization. It's called the Modern Language Association, MLA, and they have an office in New York. And there are people in the office who sit around thinking up the rules for how things should be cited and formatted, and writing this book. And it's about in the 9th or 10th edition as of the time I'm making this presentation. This is an older picture of a 6th edition. You don't actually have to buy this book because it's not very important or interesting to own. If you opened up this book and flipped through it, you would see page after page of how to cite different kinds of sources, rules that are very detailed in the way that they have to be. This is mostly for professional researchers. For purposes of school, you can go on the internet, or you can go on the class website, which has a link to a good MLA style book. Type in MLA style and find a good online style book that will give you all the same information, all the information that you need, all the current information for how to format your citations, and it should be correct and good. Also, our school provides a tool called Noodle Tools, a software program that automatically formats your works cited list in the style you specify. And it has little buttons, and you can pick which style, and MLA style is one of those buttons. The way it works is it gives you a sort of web form, and you fill in information like the title and author and information about your source and the page numbers you're using and so forth, and then you push the MLA button, and it gives you a list of the works cited, correctly formatted with all the periods and commas and fiddly stuff in all the right places. You can access that through the NECC library website. If you're accessing it from on campus, you can go right in, no problem. If you're off campus, you need a library card so you can enter your barcode number because it is proprietary for students of NECC through our library. And then finally, there's one more piece to this, which is that there's a type of information called general knowledge. This is widespread information that no one in particular claims ownership of. Usually found in multiple sources, things like historical facts or commonly known scientific facts, things that would be known by a typical informed person or a person with a background in the area you're writing about. The thing about general knowledge is you don't have to cite a source for general knowledge. You can just state it and everybody accepts that it's general knowledge. And I said historical facts a minute ago. For example, a piece of general knowledge would be something like President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. So that you can say that and you don't have to go find a history book that says that and cite that source. That's general knowledge. But if you said something was more like an opinion, like President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 by space aliens, then that is somebody's opinion, somebody's idea. I need to know where that came from as your reader so I can backtrack and find out how reliable that information is. So for that, you have to cite a source. Also, there's a little bit of fiddliness there with the idea that, well, if you're writing a paper for readers who know a lot about biology, you don't have to cite as much about biology as you would for a general audience. And there's a little bit of gray area, a little bit of judgment call in the general knowledge thing. Something that you learn over time as you remember to always cite everything and always be asking yourself whether or not things need citing. So in this class, I'll give you feedback, let you know if you're on the right track, or if you forget something, or if you cite something and you don't need to, then I'll remind you and say, hey, that's general knowledge, you don't have to worry about it. So that is the overall overview of how and when to cite information for this class and for English classes at Northern Essex Community College. Thanks.